Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brody Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Rob Johnson, author of Millennial Reboots. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Are you ready to get started?
I think so.
All right, let's get to it. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
There's a lot of advice that I've given out and other people that have written their book. And for first-time authors, it seems to come down to don't get frustrated. And your frustration leads to leaving your pen down and leaving your work aside for weeks and months at a time. And certainly when that happens, life gets in the way, or another event might happen where you won't be able to finish your work. And not giving up, and no matter what, if you're committed to this piece of writing and your book, don't give up. And frustration can come in multiple different ways, and doesn't have to be something jumping out in your way or life just happening, but it can be just second guessing your work. Is this good enough to be out in the world? Do I want my friends, family, people that I don't know, strangers, reading this work, and particularly as a first-time author? And that's scary. And my background is digital marketing, and that can be edited. So ink is a scary prospect. And even going into writing this book, and for myself in our first book, the Millennial Reboots, I had a co-author. So even finding ways to make the schedule less frustrating, to make sure that we were getting interviews done, dividing the work correctly, a lot of which can lead to frustration. And it's very important that you just don't give up. Once you're committed to it, do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the main challenges, so I think there's really two challenges in people wanting to get their books done. One, they want it to be perfect. So I always say done is better than perfect. And
Absolutely.
The second part of that is the imposter syndrome, where people just don't realize that, every single person has a story in them. And there's that old stat that we mentioned many times on the show about the New York Times talked about years ago, that 81% of Americans feel that they have a book in them, but less than 1% actually do. And I think that's two of the main reasons why, is that they want to be perfect, or they have that issue with imposter syndrome and not realizing the main reason people want to read a book is they want to be entertained. They want to be able to connect with you and to understand a good story. And I think some of the things can be really missing with that. And you just got to realize, hey, it's just telling a story. It's just having a conversation with a good friend.
You're absolutely right, and that's the easiest way to do it, and make it conversational. And what 140 characters or less has taught us is, if you make it snackable, conversational, even the chapters can be a little bit shorter. It flows really well with today's reading style, and people tend to enjoy it. And I'm just more than surprised when people would come back to me saying, I really enjoyed your book. I laughed at this section, which I didn't think was funny at the time. I was like, I hope it was a good laugh. And you'll be very surprised what you'll hear once your work is out there.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the other side of publishing, and that is, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Well, the hardest part is getting published. It's really looking at your options today. We're sitting at 2018. There are a lot more options than there were 5 or 10 years ago, and certainly digital publishing and self-publishing is now a viable option, particularly with how big Amazon is. But going to publishers and going to people and either bringing samples of your work or your completed work and having one of the first few people read it and having that rejection possibly in front of you, it's scary. And not unlike making the book itself. There's a lot of different parts that really make this hard. And that's exactly why you said 1% of the people of 80% that said they have a book in them, they're uncomfortable. And part of getting yourself out of being uncomfortable is where your best work is going to come from. So honestly, the hardest part is figuring out your plan of exactly how you want to be published. Do you want to own your works wholly? Are you going to take this on tour? What is your end goal for this book? Will really help outline of, are you finding the right publisher? Is self-publishing a good option for me? Is some hybrid of in between with a service, something that you want to do. But really looking at your goals ahead of time will help you take the sting out of what getting published, which is hard, the hardest part is. And once you can define those goals, you're much able to make a better decision to get your book out there.
And Rob, which method did you use with publishing?
Hybrid. And it was after writing multiple chapters and different either treatments and even themes, myself and my co-author, we'd hired some help. So we had somebody who had publishing experience to come in and look at our works and say, change this or help this. And that made it a lot easier to help get it done. So more of the hybrid approach, getting it published, which once it was out to a publisher and being printed, made the whole process a lot easier. But really your financial, how much you want to put into this is up to you. I felt the money and the time was worth it in order to have a better product, and at the end of the day, I thought it was.
Did they also market your book for you, or was it just the publishing side?
Just the publishing side. There was marketing tips, but for the most part, myself, my co-author, we're both marketers. I'm the B2C side. She's the business to business. So between both of us, we thought we had a pretty good grasp on getting it out there in the wild.
Well, and that's going to transition perfectly into our next question. So we're going to talk about marketing, and please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
There was a bunch of things that worked well. Just being present at things, at events, and speaking engagements, that works well. But as far as what I would say worked best was at the release, and it was feeding friends and family, and feeding the book to them first, letting them give a free review on Amazon. Once a couple days went by, go to your network and your LinkedIn connections and people that and kind of the second, third degree of your network, and say, I'm putting my book on sale just for the first couple days, and I put it at 99 cents. It's $9 or $10 on Amazon. For 48 hours, I'm going to put it at 99 cents. I really want you to read this and leave a review when you can. And that purchase plus being able to have the reviews in such a short amount of time led to what is a tipping point of more people started to look at it organically because it started to go up in the charts. And in its category, in one of the career categories, career help categories in Amazon, it became a number one bestseller in its category, which is amazing. But just using your network in order to do that in a 40-hour period really gives it a tipping point where more people will see it. So they'll see it high on the charts. They'll be interested, and you'll purchase and are likely to purchase both paper copy and the digital copies, which very surprisingly, the paper copies well outsell the digital copies, which I didn't expect going into my first book either.
So in regards to utilizing your network, you mentioned you reached out to people initially, and then you reached out to potential viewers on LinkedIn. Did you use
two waves.
Okay.
Yeah, two waves of people, and really the close network first. You wanted to make sure that your closest people like the book first before you send it out into the rest of the world. And that was the case. And then the second wave of people was really your outside network. And I'm sure everybody that's either listening to this or is even thinking about writing a book has a network of 20, 30, 50, maybe 100 people, or even looking at LinkedIn and all the people that you can say. And I put one of the things having the book even released is I took 3 different cover styles of what I was thinking of to put in the cover. And I put it on LinkedIn and said, what do you guys think? A, B, or C? And it was the most commented on LinkedIn post that I had ever. And I've been on LinkedIn since the beginning of 2007. So having those kind of things and feedback certainly helped.
Well, I like the fact that you mentioned LinkedIn. We have a lot of people on the show that'll talk about Facebook or Twitter, but you're the first one that's really taken more of a deep dive into LinkedIn and really utilizing that area in particular.
I think LinkedIn is a fantastic tool. Facebook, particularly when you get into what else is on Facebook, I think it's a very hard place. So if you're this is a nonfiction book, Millennial Reboot. It is based on taking what is these sensationalized headlines that millennials are throwing their futures away of buying houses because they like avocado toast, ridiculous things, and having counterpoints to these are just sensationalized headlines that Generation X was going to ruin the world with MTV 30 years ago. But what you can use as a millennial, or even as somebody who's managing a millennial, as a superpower. And a lot of that comes from looking at a deep dive of who we are as a society today and making sure that your communication matches the style that you're talking to, that snackable content is king now. Being able to tell a story in 140 characters or less, and that's an exaggeration, but getting quickly to the point is powerful. And being a digital native is a superpower. You can have access to anything or any information on the planet quickly, and you were born into, most likely, that ability. You grew up with that. And that is a superpower versus many other generations that you can use to further your career.
Yeah, I agree completely with you. It's what I refer to as short attention span theater.
Yep, that's where we're at. It's not getting any better either.
No, that's very true. So let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
My favorite book, and it's not that today I would call it my favorite book, but which what had the most impact on me. I think I was late in high school, early in college. I'd grabbed the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, and I like his style. And though I can't argue for or against everything that he does, however, this had a profound impact on me as growing into a marketer, into a field that I would later hopefully have an impact or had an impact on. The Tipping Point taught me of all these little things that could add up to make something big. And the different instances and stories that were put into this book, and something like he told a story, it was in Brooklyn or somewhere in greater New York City, and they started to replace these windows that kept getting broken all the time, and started covering up spray paint and graffiti that was all over the place and improving this neighborhood. And they spent time to keep it nice. And those little actions started to add up to crime started to go down in the neighborhood because people took greater pride in where they lived, and paraphrasing, faster because these small actions were taken. And bringing that into real life, my career, even little things like feeding your book to a first wave of people, then a second wave of people, creates a tipping point, which I thought was very powerful in framing a marketing mind and taking that into not just what we did with this book, but also into a career.
Well, for our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And that's been, I think it's overused, so I still use it, it's fine. I think I'm fascinated by luck. And I'll read a lot of the different books that have come out over the past 10, 15 years, and every executive or anybody who's remotely famous says, I'm lucky. And you'll hear it on interviews on television. You don't even have to read a book. And what is this luck? And I've been fascinated by it for years. And this quote, where preparation meets opportunity, has been defining luck. That has really stuck with me. And I think it's very true.
Yeah, I agree. You can never be more prepared, in my view. Preparation is key for everything.
Yeah, I feel like a lucky person, and looking back of how the events or how deep dive into how these things happen, it was really, I was prepared at the right time, and again, that is lucky. So that's truly my favorite quote.
Well, Rob, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Best way, LinkedIn. Either hit connectwithrob.com into your browser. That'll automatically go to my LinkedIn. Or follow me at Rob Scott Johnson on Twitter.
Well, Rob, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.